Hey everyone, this is Oscar from Underdog, and today I want to show you a super simple, basic technique to use a sampler to put a vocal sound in there and to chop that up and trigger it kind of like drum sounds. That way you can add the sound of a vocal to your production, and that's always going to attract people's ear a bit more than purely percussive sounds. This technique is possible in absolutely any music making software that has a sampler, which is almost all of them. And I'm going to show you the beginner level concepts and also some intermediate level tricks. Let's get into it. Before we go any further, would you be a sweetheart and click the like button and maybe subscribe if you aren't subscribed already? That really helps with the algorithm. If you want to support the channel, consider signing up for one of the classes on underdog.brussels. There's a full-length Foundations of Electronic Music course there for beginners, or consider supporting the channel on Patreon. As you can maybe tell from the background behind me, my studio is being rebuilt from the ground up and being completely redesigned. When it's a little bit more finished, in a few weeks I'll do a full studio tour. So look forward to that. Anyway, let's jump into Ableton. So this is what you got in the intro, right? So the cool thing about this is that we're using a human voice, but we are using it a little bit more like a drum and a little bit less like someone singing. And in fact, we're taking the best of both worlds. We're including still a little bit of that person singing, but then using their voice like drums. So a while ago, someone sent me this performance by Zendaya, and it's just one of those like YouTube covers that people do. They do these like beautiful acapella covers of famous songs. And so what you'd normally do is you would reach out to the person and ask for permission to use this sample. In this case, I think the chance of Zendaya actually getting back to me is pretty close to zero. So I've already just committed to never publishing this song for any kind of commercial purposes. Let's just say this is purely for educational value. And so I rip it from YouTube as YouTube to MP3 kind of thing. And that gives me an audio file. So this is Zendaya singing Smile.
Smile, though your heart is aching.
And to me, that's the iconic phrase, so I'm not even going to use all the rest of the track. So to turn this into vocal stutters like this, what you'd do is you'd create a new MIDI track like this. Control-Shift-T or Command-Shift-T will do that for you as well. Then in Ableton, if you drag this audio file into an empty MIDI track, it's automatically going to create a sampler. So you can drag it down there, and it's automatically going to place it into a sampler. Super easy workflow. So you just make a MIDI track, put the audio in the MIDI track, boom, you've got a sampler. And then you've just got to adjust the start point here. You got to bring it over to where it's going to sound interesting. And very important to realize is that samplers, if you play the note C3, which is the middle C, which is the most central note on your keyboard in most situations, right? That particular note, it's like a magic formula. That particular note tells the sampler to play the sound at its original pitch, which is often what you want in this kind of situation. Not always, but often. So imagine here. So here I go. Triggering it, and it's going to play there. So now that I've got that, let me program some notes as if it was a drum pattern. So I'm going to select a bar, and I'm going to create a new MIDI clip. Control-Shift-M or Command-Shift-M does this as well. And over here, I've got my 2 bars apparently. Let me make it 1 bar instead. With 16 steps, whenever you're programming drums, 1/16th note grid is usually where you want to be. And let me just program in something that I would maybe also do for drums, like maybe something like this. And let me loop that. See what that sounds like. Okay. See where we're going with this? Now, Shift-Tab will bring this back up, and I can move this around to where it's going to be the most interesting. Now, think about 2 types of sounds, right? Think about consonants and think about vowels, right? So consonants, they tend to have like a kind of a similar thing to a percussion. They go p, t, f, right? However, vowels are just open sustained sounds. They're sustained sounds, kind of like when you hold down a note on a piano and it just goes, right? You have the attack and the body of the sound. Well, the body of the sound is like vowels and the attack is kind of like consonants, right? So where we put the starting point of our sample is going to impact quite heavily the feeling that we're going to get. And in this case, I'm probably going to go more for a vowel sound, something like a, o, e, right? So let's find one. There we go. Now remember, in your sampler, you also have control over the envelope. So you can create an envelope that's more like a pluck envelope if you think that's better. Or you can tweak the release if you think it needs that. So down here, you've got attack, decay, sustain, and release. But let's go to the control section where we can see that visually as well. So this curve right here is the same as down here, attack, decay, sustain, and release. And let me bring down the sustain and then shorten the decay. And that way we get more of a pluck sound. Let's see. Very cool. So I can find the point at which it just feels like it's right for the song, right? A lot of sounds like this also benefit from some simple effects. Let me put some reverb and some delay on there. There we go. This could be even the lead hook of a track, right? It's quite simple. And if you want to check out some other places, we can still move this starting point around. And that could be enough, right? That's pretty fun. You can take it one step further by combining this with other similar sounds that it can bounce off of. For example, you could group this thing into a drum rack and then have each drum trigger a different vowel sound, for example. Let me show you what that would sound like. So let's take this instrument, right click and do group to drum rack. What's instead going to happen now is this thing is going to turn into a drum rack with just one thing set. And now all I'll have to do is copy this across. I held down Control here, but it's Option on Mac, I think. And so now when I trigger this, it's that. And when I trigger this, it's the exact same because obviously the starting point is in the same place. So let me find a different place. Cool. And so now the drum pattern, of course, has to be adjusted because we're playing C3, right? And C3 is to tell a sampler to play its original pitch. But what we're triggering now is we're sending MIDI into a drum rack. And in a drum rack, you've got to think that usually the drums are programmed from C1 upwards. These are just kind of conventions in music software that you got to get used to. So samplers usually take C3 as a starting point, and drum racks and drum machines usually take C1 as a starting point and count upwards from there. So instead, here, Ableton makes it quite easy by just labeling them. So I can just grab all these notes, move them down, and maybe play a secondary pattern here. I don't know what I'll do, but maybe just on the upbeat. So let's see what this sounds like together. That's pretty cool. Now imagine this in the context of the beat. This is super vibey and I really enjoy it. If you want to see the final product of this, by the way, go check it out on SoundCloud under Face the Sun. We put this song for free download a few weeks ago. And so like I said before, you can do this in any software solution that has access to a sampler. Like in Reason, you can use Mimic, for example. Oh, and just to clarify, because I got some questions in the comments, I'm not only going to be using Reason from now on, I'm going to continue to just use my normal workflow, Ableton, but use the Reason plugins whenever useful, which is pretty often. So don't worry, this has not become a Reason-only channel, as you can clearly see from today's tutorial. If you found this helpful or inspiring, come show us on the Discord channel what you made with this. If you feel like this was a lot of information and you don't really know how this fits into a structure, check out my Foundations of Electronic Music course, which will take you through all the beginner steps to learn electronic music. Let me know in the comments what you'd like to see in future videos, and until next time, stay producing, be good to one another, and take care. Bye-bye.